Hi. We look for a job that we need, and today my guest promises find a job that does not exist. So that is something about the future, and I'm very curious as you are. So let's see what we find out. So today I'm in conversation with TEDx speaker, workplace futurist inside quantum technology MC, Christopher Bishop. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Let me start with this. Where were you? What happened? Who were you surrounded with that inspired you to do what you do today?
Well, so I have to answer that question, I have to back up and say that for context, I've had 8 careers so far in the 45 years since I graduated from college with a degree in German literature. So, in terms of what I'm doing today, this is number 8 of my career list. And to be honest, I'm working on number 9. We'll talk more about that maybe later in the presentation. But the current role is the Master of Ceremonies at a series of virtual events called Inside Quantum Technology. I provide opening and closing remarks. I moderate some panels. I introduce speakers. And the way that I got into this role is that through a friend, I got a guest pass to go to an event that this team was producing in Boston. So I went just because I'm curious about innovative technology. I'm sort of a closet nerd and tech geek. Again, I worked at IBM for 15 years in a variety of roles, so I have some technical orientation. But I went to this event and met the producers, and we hit it off. Actually, the producer is probably more detail than you need, but the main executive chairman of Inside Quantum Technology is a gentleman named Alan Meckler, and he is one of the seminal players in technology event production. He ran something called Internet World at the Jacob Javits Center in New York City, like in the early 90s. I want to say 1994, when the World Wide Web was just appearing and people were trying to figure out what to do with this technology. He already had figured out that it was going to be a game changer for business and society and culture, and had produced an event with various speakers from this nascent space, and talking about how they were using the web and what they thought it might turn into. And so Alan Meckler was producing Inside Quantum Technology, and I said, I went to Internet World at the Javits Center in 1994. It was pretty amazing. Anyway, we became friends. We chatted. He asked if I wanted to be involved. I said, sure. He asked if I wanted to maybe moderate a couple panels. I said, sure. And then COVID came and the entire thing turned virtual. So he's like, well, do you want to manage this like virtually over 4 days, opening and closing remarks? And I said, yeah, let's do it. So, and that's 3 events ago. So the fourth one is coming up November 1st through the 5th. We're going to actually do a hybrid version. We're going to do it in New York City in a space at Ogilvy and Mather, a big ad agency. And we're going to live stream it as well. So all by saying, the message around that is explore new things, meet people, network. Don't be afraid to introduce yourself to people you don't know if they're doing interesting stuff.
What are the 3 mistakes to avoid?
So I would say at a meta level, if you can avoid working for jerks, do it. Now, you're going to probably encounter people who are not cordial, who are not gracious, who are not polite, not professional. I mean, the list of possible adjectives goes on and on. But I would certainly encourage young people, Gen Z learners, early and mid-career millennials, as well as even mid-career people, if you can find a situation where you feel comfortable and you don't have to deal with having a jerk giving you directions or guidance or admonishing you or reprimanding you, you know, try to do that. I worked for a lot of jerks at IBM, with all due respect, who shall remain nameless, but that's a mistake to avoid. If you can get out of a situation where you're working for a jerk. The other I would say is sort of tied to that is speak your mind. Like, don't be afraid to weigh in. Some of us are more outgoing than others. Some of us are lurkers. Some of us are contributors. But think about what you might contribute and share it. Speak your mind. And then tied to that as well is, I encourage listeners, watchers, viewers to be creative, right? Encourage your own curiosity. Push the boundaries. That's tied to, again, general career advice. We can talk about that later, but it's going where they don't know what it is yet. So those are the 3 things I would say.
What is your greatest failure story? What did you learn and how did you recover from it?
So I have a rather painful story. Um, I don't tell it too often, but I think in this context, Mohammed, it's good to share it. So I had moved to New York City to try to make a living as a bass player. Had been touring with a band before the band broke up. We did 3 albums, went all over the US and Europe. So I moved to New York to see if I could run with the big dogs. Can I be a bass player and make a living in New York City? So moved to the city. One of the things that I did was I had a jam session with quite a famous jazz guitar player from Japan named Matsuo. Went to his apartment to play. That's how you sort of got a rep in New York, is doing multiple jam sessions. That's how people figured out who you were and what your talents were. Similar to working a bunch of different jobs in today's gig economy and contingent worker model. So Matsuo says, "Okay, let's play some tunes." And I was like, "What?" He's like, like, let's play a bebop tune, or let's play a jazz standard. And I'm like, I really don't know any bebop tunes. I'd never really played jazz standards from a fake book, like a real book, right? So I was embarrassed. And the next day, I was at another session. So anyway, we sort of played some blues or whatever, simple tunes. And then he rather disgustedly led me to the door. I was like, "I'll never see you again, buddy." The next day, I was at a jam session downtown in a loft, and the guitar player in the session turned to the saxophone player and said, "Hey, Matsuo had a session yesterday. Did you hear about this?" And the bass player didn't know any tunes. Do you believe that? And I raised my hand. I said, "That was me. I was the guy that didn't know any tunes." So, anyway, the lesson was you need to come with the skills you need to be successful. I didn't have the skills I needed. So I called a friend of mine I'd gone to college with who knew how to play bebop. He's a brilliant musician, improviser. Said, "Randy, you got to help me out, man. I got to learn how to play bebop tunes and jazz standards and read from a fake book." So we spent many sessions with him teaching me how to do it. I took lessons in sight reading at a small music school in New York, hosted jam sessions in my loft. So again, the meta message is you find yourself in a situation where you don't have the skills, come to terms with it, admit it, acknowledge it, and then figure out where you can get the skills. Because that's from a meta perspective, that's going on all the time, no matter what discipline you're in, whether you're a marketing person or you're writing quantum algorithms or designing AI for autonomous vehicles. There are going to be skills you have and skills you don't have that you need to be successful. And the good news is there are lots of different ways to acquire those skills. So we can talk more about that later. But that was my sort of aha moment arriving in New York City, thinking I was a cocky bass player, I could make a living. It was like, no, man, you got to learn how to play bebop tunes. Get to it, figure it out.
What are your top three success secrets that others can follow?
I would say always be curious is the first one. Always be investigating, exploring new things. And it's a muscle you can sort of flex and develop. And encourage your viewers to be curious in whatever direction it takes you, right? But be aware that that's a skill you can hone and polish and encourage. So I encourage you to develop it. Be curious. The second thing I would say is it's sort of three or four that I especially describe when I talk to university students, but chase the maelstrom, find the chaos, go for the mayhem. And by that I mean go where the royal they being existing business models, where companies or organizations don't know what it is yet, and you can help them figure it out and be a creative contributor and be remunerated, right? Make a living. So that's what I did with the web. I taught myself to be a web producer, went from the jingle biz to the web producer, took transferable skills and acquired new skills, and moved into that new space in the early 90s. No one knew what the web was going to be. We're in a similar inflection point with lots of leading edge technologies like AI and robotics, certainly quantum, crypto assets, blockchain. Those are all what I'd call sort of fringe technologies to some degree that are being embraced and explored and standardized and are going to move toward the center in terms of business and culture and how they're applied. The third thing I would say is don't be intimidated by what you don't know. So figure it out. And again, back to my story about Matsuo, acknowledge it and it's going to go on. It's a lifelong process. You're never going to stop and say, okay, I know everything I need to know now. I can just coast. So be continually learning. It's the lifelong learning model. Learn, unlearn, relearn. And that'll serve you well as you either start a business or get a job or work at a big company or be a business partner with someone else. So those are my three success secrets.
Chris, we are entering into quick questions and quick answers round. Are you ready for it?
Yes, for sure.
What is the most impactful business book you have read, and what did you learn from it?
And I should have had it ready, and I apologize. This is the real world. I'm going to go get the book. It's right here. Um, I know you had advised me to get it ready, and I didn't. But here it is. So let's see. Can you see that? So it's called More. Um, it's by Philip Coggan, who's a writer for The Economist. It's a history of the world economy from the Iron Age to the Information Age. The thing I learned is that technology has driven business innovation for centuries, if not really thousands of years. The Iron Age, right? So we're talking a long, long time ago. Keeping in mind that technology transforms and historically has lifted all boats, if you will. So improved at a general level the quality of life of people throughout history. It's a great book. I highly recommend it. It's thick, as you can see, right? It's not small, but it's really well written, and the end notes are unbelievable. He's got a lot of data. He describes his sources in detail. So if you want to dig in even deeper, you can get more information about any and all the subjects that he covers.
What do you want to be remembered for?
When I grow up, well, again, I've been sort of eight different things so far. I think probably the next phase for me is being more officially recognized as an author. I'm working on a book called How to Succeed at Jobs That Don't Exist Yet. It's based on the workshops that I do at universities. I actually have an agent who's going to shop it for me. I would encourage all your viewers to buy it when it comes out. It's probably, to be honest, knowing the publishing cycle, which is kind of glacial, it'll probably be a year. So look for it maybe next spring or next summer. But that's sort of my next career number 9, probably, author and speaker, talking about the book.
How do you overcome a challenge life throws at you?
As a general rule, I try to take a step back and reflect, right? Pick the best option. Like, look at all the options. And the other thing to do is to trust your gut. I believe in trusting, first thought, best thought. Trust your instincts. If you're not doing the right thing, the universe will tell you. All those kind of Eastern philosophical perspectives. So take a deep breath, take a step back, look at the options, trust your gut, and move forward.
Once you have a revenue generating idea, how do you convince your significant other?
That's a great question. I have to say, I am blessed to have been with my significant other for 47 years next month. So she's seen it all, been through it all with me. She calls me her pet genius, by the way. She's been very supportive. I remember when I wanted to go from the jingle business to the web business. This is one memory that really stands out for me. We were already living in Connecticut. We had a young baby. I was doing quite well in the jingle business, making a good living. And I said, I think the jingle thing is getting to be paint by numbers for me. I really want to try doing something in this web space because I think it's exciting and I think there's tremendous potential for global social, cultural, and business impact. And I think I could probably do it well. And she's like, well, then you should go for it, honey. We'll burn through some savings till you get oriented, but let's check it out. And I did. And I ended up, again, that sort of was my entree into IBM, being a web producer, knowing how to do that. So,
Who is your living mentor and what is the impact they have on you?
well, I was saying before, I'm at the age where I don't have any real close mentors. I'm sort of the mentor. I have lots of mentees, actually. I'm a member of the Executives on Campus organization at Brew College in New York, EOC, and I mentor 2 or 3 students per semester. I do some speed mentoring for them. Back when we used to do it in person, I've been doing it via video. I mentor a group of students at Imperial College London who heard me speak at one of my workshops and asked if I would run a twice a month session with them just to take them through my future career toolkit and give them guidance and advice on career decisions and business decisions. Um, but I say if there's one person, it probably would be Daniel Pink, who is the famous author. He's written some terrific books. If your viewers are not familiar, one called A Whole New Kind of Mind about the increasing focus on creativity versus just bean counting. A book called To Sell is Human. He's a terrific author, and he's been giving me guidance around writing, and he's agreed to actually do a cover endorsement for my book when it comes out. But he's a very gracious, humble, but very talented, smart guy. So I would say he probably would be the likely candidate for my current mentor.
What are you grateful for today?
It's a good question. I mean, I'm grateful for my health for sure, that I get to share my perspective with other people and certainly with young learners. I'm grateful that I'm in a situation where I can share that and, give back. I believe in the sort of learn, earn, return as three phases of life. And I'm in the return phase, and I'm excited to be able to do it in lots of different ways.
Why is being impactful important to you?
Well, again, I've had these multiple careers, and there was an inflection point about 10 years ago where I was asked to give a talk, a keynote speech at my alma mater, at my college, to kick off a week-long senior activities kind of model. And that's when I reflected on the fact that I'm somewhat the poster child for today's learners, how they're going to work, how they're going to learn, and how they're going to work. So it's important to me that I take a step back and that I've codified how I traveled through and navigated successfully these multiple career paths, and then to give it back as advice or guidance. Again, I have what I call a future career toolkit. Voice, the three tools are voice, antenna, and mesh. And you can learn more about them on my LinkedIn Learning course, which is Future Proofing Your Data Science Career. The toolkit is in that course. It's about 20 minutes in. So if people wanted to see how it works, or if they want to contact me, follow me on Twitter at Chris Bishop, or find me on LinkedIn for sure. I'd be happy to have a follow-on conversation to talk in more detail about the toolkit and my perspective on the future of work.
How do you start your day?
Well, I like to sleep in, to be honest with you. I'm a night owl, and I think it comes from my years as a musician. I did a gig 5 nights a week at an Irish bar on East 86th Street, and the third set was 2 a.m. So, and I was cool with it. I was fine. But I usually, try to sleep in because I'm up late working usually. I'll have coffee, read various digital newspapers, the New York Times for sure. There's a great app by The Economist magazine called Espresso that does sort of global news summaries as well as sort of business insight. I look at the BBC News, check my email, and then begin.
How can we support you?
So the various ways, check out my website, which is improvisingcareers.com. That'll give you a sense of, there's the URL, of what I do. I would say if you have opportunities for me to come do a workshop, either in your university or in your organization, in your company, please let me know. I do these workshops. I've done them all over the country. I've done them at Texas A&M and at Duke and at Columbia and NYU Stern and Union College. And we have a corporate version where we encourage employees to think about what kind of job they might want to have based on their skills or skills they'd like to acquire that would drive business value for their company. So all of you entrepreneurs and business owners, think about that. We also have an exercise that we do that asks employees to think about what kind of company they would create that their parent company would want to buy. Again, the thinking is that very often employees have an understanding of customers and or the groundswell around trending in products and services that maybe executives or leaders don't have. They're not as in touch with sort of what's going on the ground, if you will. So that's a fun exercise as well. So if you're interested in those kinds of workshops, please let me know. I'm happy to speak as well. I do keynotes and workshops virtually, of course, now. about leading edge technologies, quantum information science for sure. I just gave a talk at the Quantum Economic Development Consortium about preparing the quantum ready workforce. So I'm very involved in that space. But I also give workshops on the future of fintech. I did one at Caltech last year as part of an executive education program, speak about robotics, crypto assets, AI. So, yeah, reach for me. I'd be happy to talk to you about coming and speaking or running a workshop in your organization.
What would you say about your today's guest experience on the show?
I think it's been great. I love the questions. They're different than many questions that I get asked in these kinds of settings, right? I do a fair number of podcasts and webinars. I like the range of topics that we've covered. So, and I hope your listeners and viewers have found it beneficial.
What would you say as a final word?
I would say, and I took some notes here, so let me look at my notes. I would say, don't be afraid of change, embrace it, right? That's how culture and humankind have evolved over the centuries. There are always going to be new things to learn, new jobs to do, new careers. They're going to appear at the intersection of very often historically unconnected disciplines. So get ready for that. And then focus on being able to learn, unlearn, and relearn. You have to stop thinking of education as an event that happened in the past. It's something that's going to go on your entire life. And the attendant activity is networking. So it's not what you know, it's who you know. So my other advice is at the end of the week, so here we are, it's Friday. If it gets to 5 o'clock today and you're looking at your watch and you haven't added 5 people to your LinkedIn network, get to it. Stop what you're doing. Go to LinkedIn, put in some parameters, Boolean qualifiers, if you will, Google plus data analytics plus Asia, and find people that are doing interesting work that represent the careers of the future and connect with them. Ideally, ask them if you, once you connect, if you can have maybe a 30-minute informational interview to learn more about what they're doing and to introduce yourself and get on their proverbial radar. So those are my final points, I would say. I hope that's helpful.
Chris, it has been great information. I need to watch this interview a couple of times to understand it more, and it's still intriguing to me that find a job that does not exist, and you have covered so many points, actionable steps for the audience and for me as well. I appreciate that. On the
Thank
behalf
you.
of Entrepreneur Empowerment Club and entire team, really appreciate you. And I hope our path cross again with another amazing guest. Until then, bye bye.
Well, thank you very much.